So what's going on guys, Kids here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the top 3 best S tier builds in the first Descendant. So for each and every single build I will show you what weapons and modules you want to get. Then I will explain every single skill and show you the best stats and external components. And then lastly we will take a closer look at the gameplay and mods, so you would be able to get the best results and highest damage possible and much more. If this sounds interesting to you, then let's get right into it. So then let's move over to the Freyna build. Her specialty is poisoning enemies with damage over time effects, which will cause them to get eliminated gradually. She can poison enemies in AoV thanks to the venom skills. Enemies poisoned by this effect also leave behind poison footprints that will poison any enemies following them. Therefore, carefully positioning is an important factor when it comes to playing as Freyna. You can as well find ways to manipulate enemies into tight areas where they will easily spread the poison to each other. And finally, an extra bonus of the Freyna comes from her passive skill called the Contagious Link. This will cause the enemies which are poisoned by you to take extra damage, and because of our build, we will increase our toxic damage insanely high. Then now let's take a look at our build modules. So here we have the best modules for your leveling build. You should be able to get this leveling setup by approximately level 25 to 30. This is a good base setup to have before preparing to farm the max level setup. So we want to get the Dual Claw that attacks using dual claws during a sub attack. Equipping a sub attack module also increases the module capacity. Then the Nimble Fingers, which reduces your skill cooldown. Then Skill Expansion, which increases your skill effect range for valid skills. Then HP Concentration, that improves your HP and skill critical hit rate. Then Skill Extension, that improves your skill duration. Then Strong Mentality, that reduces the resource cost when you use skills. And finally the Toxic Specialist, which increases your toxic skill power boost ratio. And after that is done, now we are ready for our max level module setup. So for the endgame build, I recommend to use the Contagion, which does that when an enemy is afflicted with room 0 trauma and dies, they will leave a contagion of poison around them. Then Dual Claw, that attacks using dual claws during a sub attack. Equipping a sub attack module increases the module capacity as well. Then Range HP Calculator, that improves your skill effect range and slightly improves your HP. Then Nimble Fingers, which reduces your skill cooldown. Then Skill Cost Optimize, that reduces your skill cooldown and slightly reduces your skill cost. Then Skill Expansion, which increases your skill effect range for valid skills. Then HP Concentration, that improves your HP and skill critical hit rate. Then Skill Extension, that improves your skill duration. Then Entropy Acceleration, that slightly increases your max mana and skill critical hit damage. Then Strong Mentality, that reduces the resource cost when you use skills. Then Toxic Specialist, that increases your toxic skill power boost ratio. And finally the Toxic Master, which increases your skill power with additional increase for the toxic skills. So then finally, let's take a look at the best weapons and stats that we should use. So for our build, the Fallen Hope is the perfect weapon for our Freyna character, as it plays very well with her poison mechanics by granting us bonuses when you shoot a poison target. And then for the weapon mods, here are the best ones, like the Concentrate Support Ammo, Weak Point Sight, Rifling Reinforcement, Concentration Stabilizer, Reload Priority, Sharpshooter, Fire Rate Priority, Defense Master, and Toxic Enhancement. You don't need these modules precisely, but of course, the more you have the better. And the most important one is Rifling Reinforcement, that boosts your overall damage with this weapon. Then second of all, we have the Nazestra's Devotion, which is a hand cannon that is great as a secondary weapon. It works especially well if you are good at aiming and are confident at hitting enemy weak points. Hitting an enemy's weak point with this weapon will reduce their defense by 30% for 3 seconds, which indirectly buffs the damage of all of your attacks. A carefully aimed shot from the Nazestra's Devotion makes this weapon amazing for single target boss fights. And lastly, another great secondary weapon that can help to buff our damage if you hit the enemy weak points is the Afterglow Sword Sniper Rifle. By hitting an enemy's weak point, it will inflict death propagation, which will improve the weak point damage by 5% per stack. You can also get extra critical hit rate when hitting commanders and other elite enemies with this weapon. And then last but not the least, we need to quickly look into the best reactor stats. I recommend prioritizing using a reactor with a high skill power and a sub attack power. After that, look out for reactors with a boost to your toxic skill power and tech skill power boost, since most of the freyna skills will fall into these categories. Other good stats to have are boosts to critical hit rate or critical damage. And finally, we have the external components. So for this build, I generally recommend to get components with stats in max shields, max HP, HP recovery and defense. So then let's move over to the gley build. She can seem like a tricky and somewhat intimidating character to play for a beginner. This is because she gets bonuses from being in the frenzy mode, which is a status that buffs her damage but severely decreases her HP recovery, and she gets additional damage increase when her HP is low, with the damage increasingly going higher as she gets closer to 0 HP. While gley is best played at low HP and in the frenzy mode as often as possible, she does still get survivability skills that allow her to sustain this. She can directly steal enemy HP and pick up life orbs from the slain foes, which will restore her health. Picking up these orbs also are required to power up her abilities, as she doesn't have any form of mana like the other classes. So here we have the best modules for your leveling build. You should be able to get this leveling setup by approximately level 25 to 30. This is a really good base setup to have before preparing to farm the max level setup. So we want to get the focus on singular, which greatly increases our singular skill power and skill cooldown reduction. Then skill extension, which increases the skill duration. Then strong mentality, which considerably reduces your skill cost. Then shock punch, that replaces your sub attack with a shock punch. This also will increase your max module capacity. Then singular master, which considerably increases the skill power, with additional increase for the singular skills. Then nimble fingers, that reduces your skill cooldown. Then time disruption, that reduces the skill cooldown and greatly increases your max HP. And finally the increased defense, that of course increases your defensive stats. And after that is done, now we are ready for our max level module setup. So then for the endgame build, I recommend to use the Predator Instinct, that modifies your firearm ATK, increasing while firing a weapon during a frenzied state. Then skill extension, that increases your skill duration. Then increase defense, that increases your defensive stats. Then increase HP, that increases your max HP. Then non-attribute master, that improves your skill power and boosts the non-attribute skill power. Then skill range mastery, which increases your critical hit damage. Then dual claws, that changes your attack and increases the max module capacity. Then nimble fingers, that reduces your skill cooldowns. Then technician, which significantly improves your skill power. Then regeneration boost, which gives you the ability to steal a small amount of HP from enemies. Then strong mentality, which reduces your skill cost. And finally the HP concentration, that increases your max HP and skill critical rate. So then finally, let's take a look at the best weapons and stats that we should use. So for our build, the Blue Beetle is the ultimate weapon, because it is a versatile choice for the gley, as she uses both fusion and singular skills, which gives us two unique buffs. The Arcane Wave gives us faster trigger rate when the Arcane Energy or Purification is processed, which in result drastically increases our DPS. And moreover, the range is nice if you plan on not using a sniper rifle or want something medium to long range. And then for our weapon mods, here are the best ones, like the Hawkeye, Reload Concentration, Rifling Reinforcement, Concentrate Support Ammo, Electric Conductor, Action and Reaction, Marksman, Weak Point Control, Weak Point Sight, and Fire Rate Up. Then second of all, we want to use the Smithereens. This weapon will give us a unique ability called the Fearlessness, that on hitting the enemy with all bullets, will increase the firearm's critical rate. This is a perfect combo for the burst damage, by boosting our critical hit rate and chance. This bonus stacked with our frenzy skill will melt the enemies in close range. And lastly, another great secondary weapon that can help to buff our damage if you hit the enemy weak points is the Afterglow Sword Sniper Rifle. By hitting an enemy's weak point, it will inflict death propagation, improving weak point damage by 5% per stack. You can also get extra critical hit rate when hitting commanders and other elite enemies with this weapon. And then last but not the least, we need to quickly look into the best reactor stats. I recommend prioritizing using a reactor with a high skill power and a sub-attack power. Secondary, look out for reactors that boost your non-attribute and singular skill powers, as most of the gley skills will fit into these categories. After that, you can look out for reactors with a boost to your skill critical hit damage, which will improve the amount of damage dealt when you land a critical hit. And our gley attribute is non-attribute, and her skills use singular and dimension, which means that you want to pick a reactor with the materialized singularity, which will boost the non-attribute or singular type, or the materialized face, which will also boost the non-attribute and dimension type. And finally, we have the external components. For this build, I generally recommend to get components with stats in max HP, HP recovery and defense. Anything else will be pointless, as don't forget that gley doesn't have shields nor mana, and that's about it. So then let's move over to the Kyle build. If you set up your character exactly how I will show you, then our build will be arguably the most durable, aka the best tank in the game, that is capable of easily shrugging off huge amount of enemy damage that would easily one-shot other classes and do damage to the enemies at the same time. We will use his magnetic force mechanic to power many of our abilities. Our gameplay loop will involve saving up the magnetic force to cause your skills to last longer and deal more damage. The amount of magnetic force Cal can hold is scaled on his max shield stat, therefore it is strongly recommended to increase the max shield stats as much as possible to make him more durable and deadlier in combat. While he is very tanky, this does not mean that Cal can't dish out damage either. His super conductivity thruster skill will allow him to fly and crash into the enemies, which creates a huge AoE that does insane damage. And as I said, if you keep saving magnetic force as much as possible with our high max shields, then this will make the skill do even more damage. Then now let's take a look at our build modules. So here we have the best modules for your leveling build. You should be able to get this leveling setup by approximately level 25 to 30. This is a good base setup to have before preparing to farm the max level setup. So we want to get the increased shield that significantly increases the max shields, then the technician that significantly increases your skill power, then increased HP which significantly increases your max HP, then defense accelerant that gives you a small boost to your skill duration and defense, then dual claw that changes your sub attack to a dual claw attack. This will also increase your max shield capacity. Please note that you can change this to a different sub attack module if you want to. The only important part is the increased module capacity. So I recommend to prioritize upgrading this module to increase your capacity even more. Then next up we have Nimble Fingers, that reduces your skill cooldowns. And after that is done, now we are ready for our max level module setup. So for the endgame build, I recommend to use the increased shield, that significantly increases our max shields. Then the Technician, that again increases the skill power. Then increased HP, which increases a lot of our max HP. Then Defense Accelerant, which gives us a small boost to our skill duration and defenses. Then Skill Simplification, that boosts the skill power at the cost of some mana, but as Kyle doesn't use mana, so this is a free boost. Then Dual Claws, that changes the sub attack to a dual claw attack, and this also increases the max module capacity. Then Nimble Fingers, which reduces your skill cooldowns. Then Increased Defense, that grants you a large boost to the defenses. Then HP Concentration, that increases your max HP and skill critical rate. Then Willpower or E-Flex, that grants you a large boost to defense and small boost to HP. And finally the Regeneration Boost, which improves your HP recovery. So then last but not the least, let's take a look at the best weapons and stats that we should use. So for our build, the Thunder Cage submachine gun is the ultimate weapon. This firearm emits an electric shockwave that creates the appearance of thunder being directed at the enemy. When defeating that enemy, it has a set chance to discharge electricity shockwave that deals even more damage to the nearby enemies. This is a really good high DPS weapon with a quick fire rate. So if you want to use the best weapon in the game, then here it is. And then for our weapon mods, here are the best ones, like the Hawkeye, Reload Concentration, Rifling Reinforcement, Concentrate Support Ammo, Electric Conductor, Action and Reaction, Marksman, Weak Point Control, Weak Point Sight and Fire Rate Up. Then second of all, we want to use the Secret Garden, which is a tactical rifle. This weapon is a good choice for our Kyle build, because of the Pest Control debuff. When using a tech skill, Pest Control increases the firearm's ATK and skill power and can even stack up to 3 times. You can lower the cooldowns and spam the Repolish dash to gain this buff. And then finally, another great secondary weapon that can help to buff our damage if you hit the enemy weak points is the Afterglow Sword Sniper Rifle. By hitting an enemy's weak point, it will inflict death propagation, improving the weak point damage by 5% per stack. You can also get extra critical hit rate when hitting commanders and other elite enemies with this weapon. Then next up, we need to quickly look into the best reactor stats. I recommend prioritizing using a reactor with a high skill power and sub-attack power. Secondary, look out for a reactor that buffs non-attribute and or tech skills, as most of the Kyle's damaging skills will fall into these categories. After that, look out for reactors with a boost to your skill critical hit damage, which will improve the amount of damage dealt when you land a critical hit. And finally, we have the external components. For this build, I generally recommend to get components with stats in max shields, max HP and defense. The max shield stat is especially important, since increasing this indirectly will buff his magnetic force mechanic and cause some of his skills to deal even more damage. So prioritize upgrading your max shields above all other stats. So with that said, I really do appreciate everyone for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions or suggestions, then feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and not miss any more amazing content. With that said, you have an amazing day and I will see you in the next one. So take it easy, peace.